In 1974, Colombo crime family underboss Anthony Abba DeMarco was recorded saying that Don Carlo Gambino was finished, and that the size of the Gambino crime family was exaggerated. Let's check him out. Anthony Abba DeMarco was born in Brooklyn on April 6, 1922. His parents were Frank and Mary. Both Anthony's father, Frank, and his uncle Michael were allegedly members of Frankie Yale's criminal gang in Brooklyn. Just 3 months after Frankie Yale's murder on the 1st of July 1928, Michael Abbatemarco was murdered himself, and his brother Frank began working for Joe Profaci. Michael Abbatemarco had been known as Mike Shots, and his brother Frank would gain a similar nickname, Frankie Shots, which would eventually become Frankie Shots. Frank Abbatemarco's son, Anthony Tony Shots Abbatemarco, would follow his father into the Profaci family after serving as a Marine in World War II. Over the years, Tony Shots' father Frankie would grow in power in the Profaci family. In March 1952, both father and son Abbatemarco were arrested for running a $2.5 million a year numbers operation. As one newspaper reported, a $2,500,000 a year policy bank assertedly run by a father and son team was knocked out of business last night by Brooklyn's racket busters. 9 men were seized in a series of raids directed at what was called one of the largest policy rings operating in this city in many years. When Anthony Abbatemarco was arrested, the police found a $2,400 bankroll in his home. Judge Samuel Leibovitz remarked at the size of the rolled up notes. "Enough to choke an elephant," he told reporters later. Also arrested in connection with this numbers operation were Carmine Persico, Larry Gallo, and his brother Joey. Frankie Shots Abbatemarco was sentenced to a year in prison, and his son Anthony received 9 months. Both served their time at Rikers Island. It is believed that Anthony Abbatemarco, who was also known as Abby, was inducted into the Profaci family in either 1951 or in a ceremony between 1954 and 1956. By the late 1950s, it is alleged that Frank Abbatemarco stopped paying tribute to the boss of the family, Joe Profaci. Joseph Profaci then ordered the murder of both Abbatemarcos, father and son. On November 4th, 1959, Frankie Shots was gunned down, and Joe Profaci had allegedly used the Gallo brothers to carry out the hit. Anthony Abbatemarco didn't hang about to see if he was also to be murdered, which indeed he was, and he decided to go on the run. In the meantime, the Gallos, who thought that Joe Profaci would reward them for taking out Frankie Shots by giving them control of the murdered gangster's numbers operations, were infuriated when they learned that the family boss had given Abbatemarco's lucrative racket to his own relatives. Famously, the Gallos and their supporters then went to war against Joe Profaci. In around August 1961, Anthony Abbatemarco came back out of hiding. He had learnt that the Gallos had been the shooters in his father's murder, but he was unaware that it was actually Joe Profaci who had ordered the hit. And so, on August the 20th, 1961, Anthony Abba DeMarco was allegedly part of the hit team who attempted to murder Larry Gallo at the Sahara Lounge. Larry Gallo famously surviving being garroted when a passing policeman interrupted the hit. Another patrolman was shot as Larry Gallo's attackers fled. The policeman recovering in hospital identified Anthony Abbatemarco as the man who shot him, as reported in the following newspaper. A 39-year-old hoodlum buddy of the notorious Gallo brothers, Larry 33 and Joe Crazy Joe 32, was identified in Kings County Hospital late yesterday by patrolman Melvin Bly as the gunman who shot Bly in the cheek outside the Sahara Lounge in Brooklyn Sunday. The man fingered by Bly was Anthony Abba DeMarco, 39, of 527 2nd Street, Brooklyn. Abba DeMarco, an underworld figure, had been brought into the Snyder Avenue Station, Brooklyn, earlier in the day in the probe of the wounding of Bly and the attempted assassination of Larry Gallo in the Sahara. Then he was taken to the hospital so that Bly could see him. Bly was shot down by Gallo's assailants as they fled the gin mill after Bly's partner entered on a routine inspection of the premises and scared them off. Anthony Abba DeMarco was released on $25,000 bail, and it appears that he was never convicted for the shooting. Despite being allegedly involved in the attempt on Larry Gallo's life. Amazingly, just 2 months later, Anthony Abba DeMarco was arrested in the company of Larry and Joe Gallo after the shooting of Joseph Magnasco. As one paper reported, 15 minutes after the murder, detectives under Assistant Chief Inspector Raymond V. Martin, in charge of Brooklyn South Detectives, pounced on the office of the Direct Vending Corp., 51 President Street, Brooklyn, owned by the Gallos and their headquarters. The detectives rounded up 11 men, including Larry and Crazy Joey Gallo and Abba DeMarco. It appears that the Gallos reached out to Abba DeMarco and informed him that it was Joe Profaci who had ordered his father's murder, even if they had pulled the trigger as widely suspected. From that moment, Abba DeMarco was then associated with the Gallos in their rebellion against Profaci. On January 31st, 1962, Abba DeMarco, along with Larry Gallo and Albert Kid Blast Gallo, rescued 6 children from a burning building, as I've covered in a previous video. After Joe Profaci had died and his successor Joe Magliocco was made to step down by the commission, the new boss of the family was Joe Colombo. Abba DeMarco, by this time, had switched his allegiance to Colombo away from the Gallos, who themselves would broker a truce with the new family boss. After coming back into the crime family, initially Tony Shots was in the crew of aging underboss Salvatore Charlie Lemons Mineo. Mineo was very ill, and his crew would be taken over by Carmine Persico, who was promoted to captain by Joe Colombo, as shown in the following FBI file. Redacted name has identified the group in downtown Brooklyn which was assigned to underboss Charles Mineo as Anthony Abba DeMarco, Anthony Riccardi, Joe Iacovelli, Ali Giantasio, and James Cordella. The informant related that there might be others in this group which he did not know about. On the 5th of January 1965, redacted name advised that Joe Colombo had made Carmine J. Persico a captain and placed him over the above group, which was formerly under Mineo. Informant understood this was done due to the poor health of Mineo and stated that he has not seen Mineo in over 2 months. Throughout the 1960s, Anthony Abba DeMarco would serve as a soldier under Carmine Persico, building a successful gambling operation. After family boss Joe Colombo was shot in 1971 and remained in a coma, he was replaced by a series of acting bosses. The obvious power in the family was Carmine Persico, but he was having legal problems. And for a brief period, a mobster called Joseph Joe Iacovelli served as acting boss. During Carmine Persico's legal problems, some sources indicate that Anthony Abba DeMarco served as acting captain of Persico's crew from 1971 to 1972. Carmine Persico, believed by many to be the real power in the family, went to prison in 1972, and most sources state that Thomas DiBella became acting boss of the family. Depending on the source, sometime around 1973, Anthony Abba DeMarco became underboss to Thomas DiBella. And then, from March to September 1974, the FBI had a bug placed in Tony Shots' 1971 Chevy. The feds recorded many conversations Abba DeMarco had, primarily with Sal Albanese, and also the greatly feared Charlie Moose Panarella. The feds would say that the evidence gathered by the bug is perhaps the most significant ever gotten on the family, due to the fact that Tony Shots discussed freely the Colombo family's vast numbers, bookmaking and loan sharking operations throughout the city. The most intriguing part of the recordings are Abba DeMarco's conversations about Carlo Gambino and his crime family. One newspaper reported, "Most dangerous for the hood were the long tirades against Gambino, the acknowledged boss of the Mafia. Abba DeMarco said, Don Carlo is all through. He's too old. Besides, he has got only a couple dozen guys and not the 600 men people say he has." However, despite being subpoenaed to appear before a grand jury, where he would be quizzed about the recordings, Abba DeMarco's lawyers stated that the mobster was psychologically unfit to testify. As one newspaper reported, "Yesterday he remained mute as his lawyers presented an affidavit from Dr. Bruce Finch, a member of the Forensic Psychiatric Department of King's Medical Center. Finch described Abba DeMarco as psychologically unfit due to his marked organic brain syndrome. The subject's judgment, thinking and memory are severely impaired. Therefore, it is my opinion that he is not fit to appear before the grand jury as a witness." Tony Shots would continue in his role as underboss of the Colombo crime family throughout the 1970s. In 1976, he hosted a reception for his daughter's wedding, and mob informant Jimmy the Weasel Fratiano would recall that there were hundreds of made men in attendance, as well as 4 of the 5 bosses of the New York crime families. In 1977, Anthony Abba DeMarco, the underboss of the Colombo crime family, made a move against family boss Thomas DiBella. Tony Shots and several others believed that Tom DiBella was favouring the Persico faction more than the rest of the crews in the family. For example, some sources indicate that after the books were opened in January 1976, the majority of the crime family's approved new members all came from the Persico faction, with the rest split across the other crews in the family. It is often stated that Thomas DiBella was a puppet for the imprisoned Carmine Persico. Abba DeMarco complained to the commission, asking for Thomas DiBella to be removed. The commission denied his request, backing DiBella and the Persicos. Abba DeMarco's chief enforcer and right-hand man, Big Sally Albanese, was invited to a peace meeting by the Persico faction in May 1977. Albanese attended the dinner, but was never seen again. Abba DeMarco got the message and fled to upstate New York. There were rumours that the Persicos had taken him out too, but this was not the case. And Anthony Abba DeMarco would live for many more years, passing away of natural causes on July 7th, 2005. Throughout his time on the run, there are rumours that he fed information to the FBI. I hope you found that interesting. Thanks for watching.